Great. And then I'm going to share my screen. But first, let me introduce myself. My name is Claire Salerno. I'm the program coordinator for the Working Lands Enterprise Initiative. And we're going to be talking to you today about the Business Enhancement Grant. And I'm joined by Lily Bradburn, who is a member of my team. And Lily, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, definitely. Hi, everyone. Lily Bradburn, they, them pronouns. I am a grants and contract specialist with the Agricultural Development Division, and I support the Working Lands Enterprise Initiative with all things web grants. And once folks are awarded grants, the more technical side of the grant side of agreements, and then also the Farm to School program is the other program I support.
Great. It's taking a second to load here. Okay. Lily, can you just confirm that you can see the slides normally?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yep.
great. Yeah, so we're here to talk about the Business Enhancement Grant application, and right now we're in the fiscal year 26 cycle. So we'll be talking about this grant. If you have any accessibility requests related to this webinar or the application, you can reach out to me to request those. My contact information is on the screen, and I'll put it in the chat later on as well. It looks like everybody is muted, which is great. We'll provide an overview of the Working Lands Enterprise Initiative and the application process, and then there'll be time for some questions at the end. And when we get there, you can use the chat or the raise hand function to ask questions. If you're not familiar with the Working Lands Enterprise Initiative, this is a state grant program. And our mission is to make strategic investments and develop policy recommendations that support a resilient and sustainable farm, food, and forest economy in Vermont. This is a program that was created in 2012 by the Vermont legislature. We manage and invest about $1 million annually into agricultural and forestry-based businesses. So over the course of the program since 2012, 18.8 million has gone to farm and forestry businesses. And this year we have $1 million available. The program is not just me and Lily. We are actually governed by a board, the Working Lands Enterprise Board, and it's made up of folks from around the state who are farm, food, and forest product business owners, as well as folks from different business assistance organizations and several state agencies, including the Agency of Agriculture, the Agency of Commerce and Community Development, and the Department of Forest, Parks, and Recreation. We also have a lot of other people that are involved in the grant application review process. So they help make decisions about they read all the applications and make decisions about grants. And so these are people that have experience operating a farm, food, or forestry business, provide business assistance services, are experienced in stewarding public dollars, and more types of related backgrounds. I just like to give folks a quick orientation to the annual grant cycle. Since this is a state funded program, we follow the state fiscal year, which runs from July 1st to June 30th. So we're currently in fiscal year 26, and we're in sort of the middle of this cycle where we're doing the outreach and webinars and providing guidance on applications. And then the application is open now. And once the application closes in December, the folks that I just mentioned will review each completed application and provide recommendations to the Working Lands Enterprise Board. And then in February, the Working Lands Enterprise Board will make award decisions. And then from there, we will notify anyone that applies and get the grants underway. And then the state, meanwhile, at the same time, the state legislature will be meeting from January until May, and they'll be finalizing the state budget for next year, and the cycle will start over again next July. So like I mentioned, there's $1 million available to award this year. We have 3 different grants. Today we're focused on the Business Enhancement Grant. Some of you might be familiar that in the past there's been special funds to the Working Lands Enterprise Fund. And so we've offered larger dollar grants up to $250,000, such as the Supply Chain Impact Grant. We don't have that grant this year because we didn't receive anything beyond the $1 million that the program receives every year. So the Business Enhancement Grant specifics that we'll get into starting with the timeline. As most of you know, on Friday, October 17th, the application opened and we put out what's called the request for applications, which is really just a document with like that has all the guidance to the applications. It sounds like someone is getting an echo. Is anyone else experiencing that echo?
I'm not
I don't have
hearing.
anything on my end.
Okay, it might be if you're experiencing echo. I don't know if you have this open maybe on multiple devices. Sometimes that can cause an echo. But like I said, we're recording, so we'll share this out so you can always watch it later if you're having any tech issues. Yeah, so like I mentioned, the application opened on Friday. We're having the webinar right now. The application will close on December 11th at 2 p.m. And I do want to note the 2 p.m. deadline. That's different. In the past, it's been open until midnight or 11:59 p.m. We're doing an afternoon deadline this time so that if you're running into any issues at the last minute, that someone will be available to help you and troubleshoot that in the moment rather than having that be at midnight. And then you'll hear back in late February or early March. And if you are awarded a grant, we would take March to kind of get all the documentation and all the paperwork done. And then the project would start in April of 2026. And this would be a one-year grant that would end at the end of March 2027. We are also going to have drop-in question and answer time over the course of the whole grant period. So that will be pretty informal on Teams. Lily and I will be available to answer any questions about web grants, any clarifying questions about the application, eligibility questions. And then we'll talk about this later, but you can of course reach out to me with any types of eligibility questions or clarifying questions anytime over phone or email. And all of these dates and the link to join the Q&A is listed on our website as well. We do want to be transparent about grant competitiveness. As I mentioned, we're working with $1 million, which is about the amount that we had last year. And even in years before when we had more money, the demand for this program is really high. We know that the needs for farms and the need for forestry businesses for equipment and infrastructure and all types of things is really high, and we don't have enough money to meet that need. So over the past two grant cycles, approximately 19% of the total requested funds were awarded. So with that in mind, we recommend applying for the minimum amount of funds needed for the project. So if you have a few different things in mind, we recommend kind of choosing the one most important thing and focusing on that rather than combining multiple things into one application. This grant is also intended for businesses that demonstrate strong financial and business management skills. That's a key part of the scoring criteria, which we'll talk about in a second. This doesn't necessarily mean that your business needs to be profitable, but if producing the required financial statements is not possible, we don't recommend that you apply for this grant, just because we know it takes time to fill out an application, and we'd be happy to refer you to other free or low cost business advising programs that you could sign up for and then apply for this grant in the future if it feels like it's not the right thing to do at this time. And I'm also happy to connect anyone with my coworker, Jenny Porter. Her job is to help you understand the different grants and other funding sources or services that are available for farm and forestry businesses. And her contact information is there, and I'll put it in the chat later on as well. So we have $620,000 available for this grant, The funding range is $10,000 to $50,000. Only in very rare cases would we award a partial grant amount. So generally, like, we would award what you apply for. We wouldn't give you like half of it. So again, recommend applying for kind of one specific project and the minimum amount needed to do that project. There aren't any matching funds required for this grant. That's a change that we started last year. And like I mentioned, this is a 12-month grant period. The main overview of who this grant is for is it's for Vermont working lands, businesses, and organizations, which primarily includes farm and forest products businesses. So some food businesses and organizations, as well as like agricultural or wood processing or distribution businesses, can be eligible if they meet some requirements that I'll talk about in a second. But because this program is intended to ultimately like support Vermont's landscape, it's important that those businesses are sourcing products from Vermont that are grown in Vermont. So the farms that are eligible are those that are producing food or fiber products. I won't read them all out here. And then any size farm within those sectors is eligible. So if you're a farm that's not producing food or fiber products, you would not be eligible. And then additionally, even if you are growing food products, if you're growing them entirely indoors, that's also not eligible, again, because this is a land-focused grant program. Forest products businesses. So any type of forest products business that is using Vermont grown logs or any other type of forest product would be eligible. If you're like a woodworker or wood manufacturer, we do ask that you provide information about where your wood is coming from and information about wood that is sourced in Vermont. And if you are sourcing wood from Vermont, you will be more competitive. And the same is true if you're a wood product trucking or distribution business. And then if you are a food business or other like farm processing or distribution business, you'll need to provide the percent dollar value and source of Vermont produced ingredients. And you should be sourcing at least 50% of raw ingredients from Vermont, or the grant is around significantly increasing the use of Vermont grown ingredients to at least 50%. So this does mean that products that you're using, like if you're like a chocolate or like a coconut or any type of those products, even if you're a Vermont-based business, you're not eligible because those products cannot be grown in Vermont. Yeah, and then if you're a agricultural trucking or distribution business or retail business, again, you would need to be primarily focused on transporting or selling Vermont grown food or fiber products. If you've received a grant in the past, there are certain restrictions on when you can reapply. Generally, it's 3 years from when the grant that you received was completed. So I won't go in depth on each of these, but if that's something you have questions about, you can reach out to me. And the reason for the restriction on past grantees is just to ensure that the most businesses can benefit from this program, since there are such limited funds available compared to the need that we know is out there. And then just some additional things to be aware of. Everyone that's applying needs to be based in Vermont. The business or structure of your organization does not matter. You can be eligible no matter how you're structured. If you're a legally incorporated business, you need to be registered with the Secretary of State. And the business stage doesn't matter. So it's okay if you can have been in business for any amount of time. But you do need to include certain financial statements from the past year. You can still apply if you're a new business and don't have some of those, but you would need to be asked to further demonstrate other business management skills and evidence of strong business planning. So there's a few different types of projects that are eligible. This program, I'd say we most often see applications for equipment and infrastructure projects, and we can fund both new or used equipment. It can also include down payments for larger pieces of equipment, rehabbing equipment that is new to the business, or upgrading equipment with new features or attachments. And then any type of building project could be both the planning, permitting, and the engineering part of it, the building cost itself, which can include labor and contractors, and then it can also include equipment installation or other technical assistance costs. Marketing work is also eligible, as is research and development or workforce training and development. The main things that are not eligible would be any type of land purchase, rent costs, or leases. Livestock and animal purchases are not eligible. Farmer and farm worker housing are not eligible. General business advising or business planning expenses, like hiring a business planner or consultant, is not eligible. If that's something you're looking for, there are a lot of programs available that you can sign up for that are free or very low cost. And then the other thing that is important to highlight is that if your project is primarily, like even if it's related to equipment or infrastructure, if it's like a ongoing or recurring cost of doing business, that's not an eligible project. So an example of that would be anything that's your cost of goods sold, so buying feed or supplies, such as packaging or ingredients, would not be eligible. Any sort of like general, just like labor for your regular employees for their regular work benefits or accounting costs, and repair or maintenance of like dilapidated equipment that's critical to business operations and should be regularly serviced or maintained. So deferred maintenance is not a good use of funds, but if you need to upgrade your equipment to expand capacity, or like add an attachment, so that it can do something else, that is eligible. So if you have any questions about sort of the difference between equipment that is eligible or isn't, I'm happy to chat more about that. And then utility bills are also not eligible. So we'll go over how to apply. So the first step is to read the request for application, which, like I said, is really just a grant guide. So it has all the information about the grants, including the overview of what the grant is, contact information for Lily and I, the eligibility criteria that we just went over, but there's more detail. So if you have questions, I'd recommend looking there first. It has all of the application questions listed out. It has all of the scoring criteria, and then it has information for what happens and what you need to do if you're awarded a grant. So we really recommend that you read the whole thing before applying. I do know that it's a long document, but it's got all the information you need. But if you're looking for something and can't find it in there, let me know, and I can point it out for you. However, even though the whole application is listed out there, the actual application you have to fill out in WebGrants, which is an online system. And if you are awarded a grant, you'll also use the system to submit grant reports and request payments. Lily is here to help you with any issues that you have in WebGrants. So please feel free to reach out to them as soon as you're having a problem. And in a second, Lily's going to do a walkthrough of how the system works. I think this is basically what I just said. We also have an application guide specifically for web grants with screenshots that walks you through how to submit the application online. So the information that's in the application, the first part of it is information about you and your business, just sort of like where are you located, what kind of business is it. There is a voluntary demographic information section about you, but that's anonymous and not linked to your application, and it's also optional. Then we get into an overview of the project and some other specific information about your business. So this would be a summary of what are you looking for funding for and why and what will it do, who's going to be involved and how does this relate to your overall business planning and goals. And then you'll submit business financial statements, which is a balance sheet, like a current balance sheet, and then a prior year and a current year profit and loss statement, and then a cash flow statement. And there is a lot more information about these financial statements as well as examples in the request for applications document. The intended project impact section is a section that asks you to identify like how would this project impact your business and also impact Vermont's working landscape. So it's questions about if this would increase your sales, how would it impact your sales? How might it impact your product output? Land management or adding acres into agriculture or forestry production. You can identify any like climate adaptation impacts as well as worker well-being or workforce development impacts. And then I think the last one is any impacts on like business or community equity, engagement, and quality. So there's a lot of different impacts that your project might have, and we don't expect that you would have impacts in all of those areas. Some people's projects might be really sales focused, and that's fine, and you can focus on that section and explain what it is. But some of you might have projects that are more focused on worker well-being and land management and equity, and you can fill out all of those sections. And then you need to fill out a project work plan, which is just a timeline of when each step of the project is going to get done, and then also by who. And then you'll need to fill out a project budget, and you do need to submit quotes for any budget items that are costing more than $5,000. And then there's an optional section on additional attachments. So if you have another business that you're working with, if you have a business advisor, or if you have customers or buyers or suppliers that would also benefit from this project and want to write a letter of support, you can upload it. It doesn't need to be a fancy letter. It can just be someone saying like, yep, if they got this piece of machinery and increased their production, I would buy like anything that they added for the next year or something like that. And there's also a space for any other documents that you think would help explain the project to reviewers. So if you have any like blueprints or mock-ups or like a video of the piece of equipment in use, it's really anything that you felt like you wanted to add that there wasn't space for or a question about in the application. And then everyone is required to fill out this water quality compliance form, just explaining that you're not in violation of any state water quality regulations. The scoring criteria, you can read more about it on page 21 of the RFA. So the highest area is that project impact. And so that's what I mentioned of that might be sales, it might be increasing your product output, it might be land management, could be a lot of different things. It could be a combination of things. But we want to be seeing some kind of impact to your business that's like improving Vermont's overall farm and forest economies. The next area is business viability and financial management. So that's related to the financial statements you submit, which again, don't necessarily need to show that you're a profitable business, but that you have strong business and financial management skills in place, and the information in those documents makes sense for the age of your business, like the type of business you are, and that type of thing. And then this is also based on questions around financial need and like overall sort of business planning. Demonstrated project need is around, does the application show that there is a clear need for this project from the perspective of your business? Like there's a clear case for that you need this piece of equipment or you need to build this thing and it needs to happen in the next year. Quality of concept is the project well thought out? Does the timeline make sense? Is it achievable? Is it ready to go? The budget is making sure that the budget makes sense, that the quotes are there if needed. And then the engagement, equity, and equality, that in the application is part of the project impact section, but it's actually scored separately. And yeah, I do want to emphasize that an application can be strong without scoring highly in all of these scoring categories. So we understand that, yeah, some projects might be stronger in some areas than in others, and we really look kind of holistically at the whole project. And the scoring, the award decisions are not based just on like who scores the highest. Every application is read and scored by 3 different reviewers, and those scores are averaged and looked at, but then there's a discussion. Every application is discussed by reviewers. And certainly there are applications that maybe don't score as high, but are still awarded based on maybe there's just like a really strong need in the industry for that business or that project to move forward. Great. So this is a screenshot of the Web Grants homepage, and now I'm going to pass it over to Lily to do a walkthrough of how to use Web Grants.
Great, thanks, Claire. All right. So I'm gonna go through just the steps of how you get registered in Web Grants and then how you would navigate within the portal itself to access the application, and then just point out a couple of things about the application itself as it exists in Web Grants. The first thing I'll just reiterate, like Claire said, I highly recommend registering ahead of time. The registration process itself usually takes about 2 days to go through. And then familiarizing yourself with Web Grants, even if you're someone who might fill out most of the components of this application, say in a separate Word document, and then you'll copy and paste things into the application, I definitely recommend well before the application deadline, just get used to Web Grants, see how it lays out, how the application sections sort of compare formatting wise from what it is in the RFA to what it is in the actual Web Grants application. That way, when you're ready to submit everything, no surprises come up, especially as it gets close to the application deadline. This is on the Working Lands Business Enhancement Grant page itself. It's a good place to start. Is this how to apply? So the RFA is in here, but then also the link to register in Web Grants. And then there's also a Web Grants application guide that I'll point out. I will also put in the chat here. This is a step-by-step screenshot how-to guide of how to register in Web Grants if you're someone that sort of prefers those step-by-step screenshot guides. And when you go to register, you'll see here there's information for both personal contact information and then organization information. So you want to be filling this out, keeping in mind who is the business that is going to be ultimately holding the responsibility for this grant agreement. It's a rule of thumb with Web Grants, if anything is red and it has an asterisk, it's required, so you want to fill that information out. So you'll fill all of this out, and then you can save this registration information. It'll take about 2 days to get processed, and then you're going to receive 2 emails, one with your username and one with your temporary password. And then you can go to the login page. This is also that same screenshot that Claire showed. This is where you have this yellow click here to register. So there's a couple of ways you can either go through the business enhancement page, or if you're at Web Grants, this is how you can access the registration page. I also like to point out that my contact information is here as well. So if you're having any issues logging in for the first time or at any point and you need to get in touch with me, my information is here. But once you sign in, Web Grants will bring you to sort of this main dashboard page with work assignments. If it's the first time you're logging in, I definitely recommend just going to this My Profile page. There's a blue button over here for reset password. And I recommend when you get the temporary password, just putting something in that you're more familiar with. And then to actually access this funding opportunity, you would go to the Funding Opportunities tab on the left-hand side. This is going to show you all the current posted funding opportunities through the Agricultural Development Division. So you're going to want to make sure that you navigate to the one that says program area is the Working Lands Business, and then it's the FY26 Working Lands Business Enhancement Grant. And so once you select that, this first page that comes up is funding opportunity details. This is just reiterating all the same information from this webinar, the same information that's in the RFA, but you're more than welcome to just refamiliarize yourself with what's in here. There's also, again, me and Claire's contact information. And then there's some more website links. So again, that grant webpage we started out in, and then a how-to guide for applying in web grants, which is this guide here. Again, offers some screenshots, step-by-step directions on how to access a funding opportunity and begin an application. And then there's some frequently asked questions from Working Lands grants, and then the RFA again itself. So just more information being reiterated in multiple places. To start the application, you'll go to this green Start New Application button. And this is just going to get some introductory information. I usually recommend putting some kind of unique title in here. A lot of folks might just put like a placeholder, but then not update it in the end. And it's just helpful to have a unique title for both when folks are reviewing and then if you were to be awarded, to have your grant agreement have some kind of unique title. And then the primary contact most likely is just going to show up with just your name. This is our tester account, so a couple more names might show up, but once you hit save, it'll ask for the organization. If you happen to be someone who maybe you're connected with multiple businesses within the web grants portal, there might be multiple organizations listed here, but for most folks, it's just going to show the organization that you are applying on behalf of. And then this is optional, but this additional contacts down here. So this would be if you're, say, you know, two folks who are working together to put this application together, or you want someone else who's going to be supporting you to have access to this. Everybody has to be registered in web grants, but you could go into here and add that person. So this is our tester account, but say I want to add myself, I can just put myself in there because I'm registered in the system. And then you save information. And that's just the general information for the grant. So this is the main hub for your application. The first thing I'll kind of point out when you're navigating web grants and you're beginning your application is I'd always recommend just using internal buttons within web grants to navigate. So browsers, you know, Chrome, Edge, whatever, do have like back buttons and refresh buttons. I'd recommend not using those. Web grants has its own back button, and then there's always different tabs, like on the left-hand side or here in this application details page, different tabs you can select to navigate. Sometimes the browser to web grants information doesn't quite go through and it might kick you out to some place that you didn't want to be. You might have the potential of losing work. So always recommend just using these navigation buttons. And then what you'll see here when you first have filled out this general information, you get this big red bar just as the application can't be submitted currently. So the steps for getting this information into web grants is first you want to input the required information where it's asked for each of these application pieces. And once you do that, you want to save the form. I always recommend whenever you're navigating in web grants and filling in different required fields that you're just saving along the way. When you feel like you've filled in all the required information, you mark it as complete. And so I'll go through what that looks like. And then once it's marked as complete, you get this green check mark. So this general information, we just filled it out, we saved it, we put all the information that's needed, and this green check mark comes up. Once you get green check marks all the way down, then you'll get a green bar across here that says your application's in compliance and ready to be submitted. The last step that sometimes folks will forget is you then need to submit it. So a button will appear up here right next to this preview application that says submit. And you'll want to make sure that's your very final step, that you hit submit before the application deadline, because that's what actually submits the full application to Claire and to reviewers. So I'm going to go through just a couple of these different component pages, just point out a couple of quirky things and things of note. So the first is we have this global application form, which the Agricultural Development Division has for all grant applications. And towards the bottom here, you'll see this voluntary demographic information. This this link will take you to a Microsoft Forms survey that is outside of web grants. So I recommend whenever there's a link to click within a web grants application that you always just right click and open link in new tab. Sometimes if you go to click a link and you don't do that, it might actually completely kick you of web grants. And if you happen to have information that you hadn't saved yet, you might lose that. So this would just take you to a separate form within Microsoft Forms to fill out, again, because this is an anonymous voluntary survey. So that's the global application form. Again, if you see here, there's this save form button. So if I were to click save form, this would kind of give us a static version of whatever's been filled out so far. And then you see these orange mark as complete buttons come up. So if I were to select that now, we haven't filled in the required information. So we get a warning that says, you know, this is what you need to fill in for required information. But if we had filled out everything, it would have kicked us back to this application list. And so, like I said, there's different ways to navigate through the application. So you can go back to this app list, and this brings you back to that initial page. And it would show marked as complete, and then it would show that green check mark. The next one that I want to point out is this intended project impact page. So this one actually has a lot of nesting questions depending on how you respond. The one thing that I just wanted to point out is that you do need to respond yes or no to every single one of these. So these are all marked red with an asterisk. If it's not applicable to you, you just have to select no, but you do need to select it in order for the application to know that you've actually filled in the required information. So if I were to say yes to this, it actually would bring up several questions. But if I were to say no, none of those questions would show up. So just want to point that out so folks don't miss. You actually have to hit yes or no for each of those. And then the next thing that I'll point out is this project work plan. This is a multi-list, so this is where you're actually filling out a table within Web Grants. And the one thing that I want to point out about this is you do need to enter at least 3 project activities. So you'll see here this add row button. So if you were to click that and you just put in information that is being asked, you can save that row, and then it would actually populate that as a row within the table. But if you tried to mark this as complete, it would say you need a minimum of 3 rows. So that's, again, just another one to be mindful of. If you were to fill out all the information you need in here, but you wanted to edit all that information at once, you can actually hit edit all rows, and you can actually go back in, and it shows it to you as a table. It's a little easier sometimes to navigate editing it. And then a piece that I'll point out is for the project budget. So this is actually pre-filled or pre-populated as a table with all the fields ready to be filled out. You'll see here that all of these columns are in red, so it's required information. But if the budget line items in question are not relevant for your project, the only things you'll need to do is that for both source of additional project costs and details and purpose, you can put NA. And then sometimes this will happen. It's not always the case, but sometimes these zeros, these pre-populated zeros, if a budget line item is not relevant for your project, but you go to save this grid and then mark as complete and it says, you know, missing information in project budget, I might just recommend filling in zeros yourself. So just like going through and putting in zeros. Sometimes Web Grants isn't picking up those default zeros. So just a sort of troubleshooting if that's something that comes up for you. And then different points of the application also have options for uploading. And so what you'll do here is if you select the file, it'll bring up your computer's internal file system. You can find the file you need in question, select it, and upload it here. And then I'll also point out this additional attachments. So these are space to upload up to 5 documents. That can be optional, but within this section itself, there is a required question asking how much time you spent on the application. So just want to point that out, that even though this additional attachments is optional, this section on time spent on application is required. And then the final piece that I'll point out is that water quality certification that Claire mentioned. So the form itself actually has a link, which again, you would right click and open link in new tab to the blank template that you would need to fill out for that Act 154 certification. You can download this and fill it out. I will say sometimes with this signature section, if you do an electronic signature, sometimes that doesn't go through. So just double check when you upload this into Web Grants that your electronic signature has actually shown up. But that form is available here in the certification, so you don't have to go hunt it down. And so those are some of like just the main kind of different unique aspects with this application. Again, the process is really, you want to save everything as you're going, save all the information as you're filling it out. When you think it's filled out to the best of your ability, marking it as complete. So you get this green check mark for each of these sections. And then when you get all green check marks, once you get that green button, you want to hit submit. And like I said, definitely recommend navigating through this and sort of filling this out ahead of time, ahead of the deadline, just to familiarize yourself with Web Grants. And if you do have any issues, I'm available Monday through Friday, 7:45 to 4:30. And the one last thing I'll point out too is that if you're sort of working on this and then you saved it, you want to come back to it again, the two different ways you can do that is from, again, this dashboard, this main page when you log in. You can either just go through that funding opportunities, find the business enhancement grant one, and then your application will show up here at the top. Or you can go to this applications tab. We have a lot here because this is a sandbox account, but it'll just show you the applications you've either are currently editing or have been working on. And so you can also navigate here. So just two different ways you can get back to your application if you have been working on it but saved it. And yeah, I think that is it. Unless there's anything else, Claire, you can think of.
I don't think so.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a question in the chat for you that maybe you can answer there. So I'll go through the rest of the slides and then we can get up for any questions.
Cool.
Great. So just a few more, I think now I'm just gonna go into general like resources and tips for you as you work on your application. We do have a really great option for grant project planning assistance, and that's available first come, first serve. And so this includes working with a business advisor from the Vermont Farm and Forest Viability Program. And this is, they would provide a few hours through a video or phone call to think through what project to apply for, like help them advise like what makes sense for your business if you have a few projects in mind or there's something you want to do, but you're not sure if this is the right time or if that's even the right thing. They can help you with that. That's not something that I can advise you on. They can also review your financial statements or provide like an overview, like a sort of review of your grant application. They will not write your application for you and like draft out questions. They won't fill out the application in the portal. They won't help you write a business plan. If you are looking for support with filling out your application in the portal or writing answers, I recommend that you reach out to your local conservation district. I'm happy to help connect you to those folks. If needed, they might be able to help you, they might not. And if you want help writing a business plan, then I suggest that you fully enroll in the Vermont Farm and Forest Viability Program. But anyway, if you are looking for this grant project planning support, please email me and then I will ask you some questions to make sure that your business and project are eligible. And if they are, then I will connect you with a business advisor. So yeah, general resources and tips that I share with anyone that wants to apply. We have a frequently asked questions, or FAQ, online. That's been recently updated. It will continue to be updated throughout the application period. We recommend starting early. You're all here, so that's great. But yeah, making sure you've got your financial statements ready, you've asked someone to write a letter, you're getting quotes, and you know kind of what the project will look like. Read the whole RFA and scoring criteria. That being said, don't be afraid to reach out directly to me if you can't find something or you've read it and you're still confused. Rather than spending hours and hours trying to figure it out, just shoot me an email, give me a phone call, or send me a text and I can answer your question. Same with if you're getting stuck with something in web grants, we don't want you to like spend hours and hours trying to figure something out when Lily might be able to help you really quickly. To be fair to all applicants, I can't review your application. We can't read through anything. I also can't estimate whether your project will be funded. That is simply because I don't know who was going to apply and for how much money. I can advise you on if your project is eligible. I can advise you on if it like generally makes sense for this grant. And I can certainly point you to the scoring criteria. And yeah, recommend that you look through that and explain your application how your project will meet each element. Like I said, we've got the application guide for web grants. If you're feeling a bit overwhelmed by the grant portal, you can feel free to draft your responses in a separate document and then enter them in web grants. We have a Word document version of the RFA, which, like I said, has all the application questions for that purpose. But again, make sure you allow plenty of time to copy it into the portal in case you missed something or deleted something or you want to change something or you're just having issues. Just allow plenty of time to make that shift.
If I could add on to Claire, just
Yeah.
with the if you're going to copy something over from a Word document, I also recommend just reviewing what gets copied in. Sometimes like formatting, special characters might not transfer over to, and they might make, what you've actually put in the application look wonky. So I always just recommend like review what got copied over from a separate document.
Yeah. Yeah. And then in terms of understanding like what to put in the application, we try to, ask the questions in a way that you can just answer them and answering the question. It doesn't need to be fancy. You don't need to be like a really good writer. We just want you to answer the questions. And we've also tried really hard to put in the like the character counts or the word counts in web grants. We've tried to note like this, you should answer this in like 2 to 3 sentences, or this one might be 4 to 5 sentences. Yeah, so you generally don't need to be writing like an essay for each question. The important thing is to include information that's key for someone who doesn't know anything about you or your business. Include information about the problem that the grant seeks to address. So explaining like what's going on now and then what would change if you're like, people are having to like carry all of our like product from here to here, and that takes this much time. And if we had this other piece of equipment, or if we built this thing, we could do it in this much time instead. Like that kind of stuff is really just saying like, here's where we are now. And if we got this grant, like here's what would be different. And then also demonstrating the planning and resources invested so far in your organization and project. If you've already kind of worked on something related to this and this is adding on, that's really helpful to know. Like I said, we try to make the character counts in web grants to be like what the length of the answer that we're looking for. So that might just be a few sentences. That said, we're not trying to have you waste a lot of time having to like delete a word here and there. So if you feel like you've run out of space or there was a question that you felt like you couldn't fully answer, you can always add additional information and upload it at the end. And if you're not awarded a grant, you can request feedback on your application to strengthen future applications. We are happy to provide that. And we often see that folks that don't receive an application the first time around, if they take that feedback into consideration and apply in the future, that really helps them submit a better application and be awarded in the future. I'm just going to touch really quickly on if you're awarded a grant. So, like you'll need to fill out some paperwork before you get started. And that includes submitting a W-9 or certificate of insurance, and we'd work with you to develop an official grant agreement that we would sign and you would sign, and that would all have to be done before you can actually start working on things. And then over the course of the grant, you would have to fill out a report or two and request the payments and web grants. If you want to read more about past grantees, you can do so on our funded projects page on our blog. And yeah, if you are looking to stay in touch, if you're feeling like maybe this grant isn't for me right now, but it's going to be here next year, please sign up for our newsletter. Take a look at the grant calendar for other grants that maybe are a better fit for you or that you also want to apply to. You can follow us on social media. And like I said, and I put in the chat our contact information already, that I'm here for kind of general, any type of program question, and then anything that's web grant specific, that's Lily. Our hours are generally 7:45 to 4:30, Monday through Friday. If that really does not work to you and you have some questions and it's not something we can work out over email, let me know and we can see about finding potentially an evening time to meet. But then the other thing to also keep in mind is as that deadline on December 11th at 2 p.m. gets closer, you might not be able to get back to you right away if you're having an issue. So please do reach out as early as possible. Okay, I think that is everything. So I'm going to stop sharing. And I see that there were some questions in the chat. So I'm going to go through those now.
Would it be helpful, Claire, if I read them out to you?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay, great. The first one was from Janet, and it's, are there any ready funds available to pay grant writers?
Not for,
funds.
yeah. So Ready, for those that don't know, is a program that businesses or municipalities can sign up for grant writing services. That is not available for this grant. This grant is structured so that we hope that you don't necessarily need help filling out. We try not to make it too complicated. So Ready funds are not available for it. That being said, if you're feeling like you really need help with it, let me know and I can try to connect you with someone who can help you.
And then there's one from Ed. I know a match, this is required, but I'm assuming isn't required, but would a match help the application?
Not necessarily. I think a match would help only in the sense that, like I said, there are very limited funds available, and like the more money you can put in is the less money that you would have to ask for. And so in theory, like that might mean that just mathematically speaking, it would be more likely that your project is funded. But yeah, I think that's the kind of that would be the, I think it really depends on your business and the nature of the project. I think if there are, like I said, we recommend applying for the minimum amount of funds that you need. So if that means that you can provide some matching funds, I think that's great. But on the reverse, that's not necessarily going to hurt you if you don't have any matching funds because it's not required.
Great. And then again from Ed, quotes for equipment are normally for a limited amount of time, not the time between grant application and grant funding. How would we deal with that problem?
Yeah, that's a good question. And it is unfortunately a problem. And I wish that we had a really good answer for it. Yes, it is true that quotes are limited. And the cost of something might go up between when you apply and when you receive a grant. But we can't unfortunately change the grant amount like once you're awarded and if you've learned that the cost has gone up. So we recommend that you apply for like what the most realistic cost is now based on the quotes. And yeah, while we can't increase the grant amount if costs do go up, we can help connect you to other funding sources, and we also can be flexible on the timing if things need to take longer because of increased costs. Yeah, there's probably a more eloquent answer to that question in our FAQ, but the upshot is that apply based on what the quote is now. And unfortunately know that it could change.
And then Beth asked, what does a grant agreement entail?
Yeah, so a grant agreement is this like long kind of legal document, but a lot of it is basically parts of your application copied in, specifically the work plan, your budget, and then some of those like project impact areas, and then a short summary of your project. And really what the grant agreement is it is a legally binding document between the state of Vermont and you as your business to say, we are granting you these funds to do these things and to meet these, they're called deliverables, like these goals. And then there's a lot of sort of specific language around like when you get paid and like what you have to do to make sure you get paid. Generally, we would pay you 40% of the grant upfront, 40% at the middle point when you fill out a report, and then 20% the end of the project when there's a final report. So that's kind of the upshot of what the grant agreement is. And then if you are awarded a grant and things change, you know, we've dealt with all kinds of things from like, we know many of you are small businesses and maybe have family things, maybe illness, maybe things really change for your business, or maybe yeah, something in the market changes and there's a delay or you need to shift something, there is flexibility to make changes to the grant agreement based on what those are, and that would be something you would discuss with us as they come up.
You can also, on page 22 of the RFA, is some more of the legal information. Like there's an attachment C that's required on all state grant agreements. That you can also like look through and see like what's some of that information that's going to be included in that grant agreement.
Mhm.
Great. And then over what time period would we show Vermont agricultural purchases, this year or the past 12 months?
Okay. I'm not sure I completely understand that question, but your grant agreement, like your grant project that it would be for 12 months for around April 1st, 2026 to March 31st, 2027. And you don't need to track all of your purchases related to the grant. I believe we just ask for the receipts for anything that's $2,000 or more. And then you fill out more just general questions of like, did you do the work? Send some pictures, like what challenges did you encounter? Is everything going as planned? That type of stuff.
And then any estimate on how much time to complete?
It's a good question, the $1 million question. So just last year, we started asking a question about how much time it takes to complete applications because we realized we didn't have a good sense and we wanted to understand that. And so we have that information from last year, but we also changed, we actually removed a whole section of the application this year. And we've changed things. We've really actually tried to we've removed a lot of questions, so I don't really have a good estimate for you. I think it also really, from what we saw last year, was that it really varied. So I think if you have all your financial statements, you've got like quotes and everything's kind of ready and you just need to answer the questions, it can not take that long. And I think if you have to sort of go in and really think through a lot of things, that can take a lot longer. So I think it depends.
Right. And then the last one we have in the chat is, do we need to hit the minimum 10,000 or if our project is smaller, would it be okay to request less?
The minimum is $10,000, so you wouldn't be able to request less than that. Oh, I see the purchase of, okay, there's a question around, oh, okay, so determining if you're eligible and if you're using Vermont grown, determining if you're eligible based on how much Vermont grown products you're using. Last 12 months or this year. I think it would just be like currently, like I think whichever made more sense for your business is fine. I don't think we have a strong, I think whichever one feels most representative of the current situation is fine. So we could discuss that one-on-one, Ed. Great. Well, it is noon, and so I want to know that probably many folks have to jump off. But yeah, as you know, we'll be doing question and answer. So if you feel like something didn't get answered or you want to just listen to other people's questions, you can come to that next week or anytime over the grant period. Or feel free to email me or send me a call or text and I will get back to you. And we'll post the slides by the end of day tomorrow. The recording might take into next week to post online. And then we'll also send it to you over email as well. Thanks, everyone.
Great. Thank you all so much.